Welcome to Heart of a Soldier, where the mysteries of military service run deeper than classified documents and darker than redacted files. Today's story takes us to the Nevada desert, where time itself becomes the enemy, and some secrets are buried so deep that even the desert cannot keep them hidden. This is the story of Operation Hourglass, a mission that lasted forever, yet never happened at all. Park Ranger Maria Santos had patrolled the Nevada National Security Site for 15 years. She knew every rock formation, every hidden canyon, every restricted area within the massive desert compound. What she didn't know was that Sector 7G existed. It wasn't on any map. Her GPS showed empty desert where she now stood, looking at a clearly marked trail leading into a narrow canyon. The trail was fresh, as if it had been used yesterday. Yet, according to her records, no one had been authorized to traverse this area since 1962. Dispatch. This is Ranger Santos. She spoke into her radio. I'm at the coordinates I sent you earlier. I'm seeing signs of recent human activity in what should be a restricted archaeological zone. Static crackled back. Santos, our maps show you're in the middle of empty desert. Are you sure about your position? Maria checked her GPS again. The device flickered, showing conflicting readings before settling on coordinates that placed her both at her current location and somehow nowhere at all. That's when she saw the smoke. A thin column of white smoke rose from deeper in the canyon, too steady to be a natural fire, too consistent to be abandoned equipment. Against protocol, but driven by duty, Maria followed the trail. The trail led to a site that defied explanation. Nestled in a hidden valley was a military camp that looked like it had been constructed that morning. Olive drab tents stood in perfect formation, their canvas taut and new. Communication antennas stretched toward the sky, and she could hear the steady hum of generators. But it was the soldiers that made her question her sanity. 12 men in 1960s military uniforms moved through the camp with purposeful efficiency. Their insignia marked them as members of the 441st Special Operations Group, a unit Maria had never heard of, despite her extensive knowledge of military history. The strangest part was their age. According to the dates on the equipment scattered around the camp, these men had been here since October 1962. That would make them well into their 80s, yet every soldier appeared to be in his 20s or early 30s. Excuse me, Maria called out, her hand instinctively moving to her sidearm. A tall sergeant with piercing blue eyes approached her. His name tag read Davidson. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave this area. This is a classified military installation, and civilian access is strictly prohibited. Maria showed her ranger badge and federal identification. I'm Park Ranger Santos with the Department of Energy. This is my jurisdiction. I need to see your authorization to be operating in this sector. Sergeant Davidson's expression remained professional, but confused. Ma'am, we have our orders directly from Strategic Air Command. Operation Hourglass is currently in progress, and we're under strict orders to maintain position until relieved. Strategic Air Command was reorganized in 1992, Maria said. What's today's date, Sergeant? October 15th, 1962, ma'am. Despite every instinct telling her to call for backup, Maria's curiosity overrode her caution. Sergeant Davidson led her to the command tent, where maps of the Soviet Union covered every surface and radio equipment from the early 1960s hummed with activity. Captain Morrison, Davidson announced. We have a civilian who claims to be a federal ranger. Captain Morrison looked up from a teletype machine that was printing what appeared to be urgent military communications. He was perhaps 30 years old, with the bearing of a career military officer. Ranger Santos. I'm Captain Richard Morrison, commanding officer of Operation Hour. I'm afraid your timing is rather unfortunate. We're in the middle of a national crisis. Maria examined the teletype messages over his shoulder. They detailed Soviet missile installations in Cuba, naval movements in the Caribbean, and strategic assessments of nuclear strike capabilities. Her blood ran cold as she realized what she was seeing. Captain, these are Cuban Missile Crisis communications. That crisis was resolved 61 years ago. Morrison's expression didn't change. Ma'am, I can assure you that as of this morning, Soviet nuclear missiles remain operational in Cuba. President Kennedy has placed all military units on DEFCON 2. Our mission is to maintain communication with Strategic Command and prepare for potential nuclear retaliation. Maria pulled out her smartphone, showing Morrison the date, October 15, 2023. The captain stared at the device, as if it were alien technology. What is this apparatus? Dr. Elizabeth Chen arrived at the site 18 hours later, leading a team of physicists and military historians from Los Alamos National Laboratory. As a specialist in temporal anomalies and classified military research, she was the government's go-to expert for unexplainable phenomena. Ranger Santos, Dr. Chun said as she examined the camp with sophisticated measuring equipment. You've stumbled onto something that officially never existed. Operation Hourglass was a theoretical project. Emphasis on theoretical. The readings on Dr. Chun's equipment were unlike anything she'd ever seen. According to these instruments, this entire area is experiencing what I can only describe as temporal displacement. Time is moving normally, everywhere, except in this precise location. Captain Morrison and his men continued their duties as if nothing unusual was happening. They filed reports, monitored communications from 1962, and prepared for a nuclear war that had been avoided decades ago. How is this possible? Maria asked. Dr. Chung consulted a classified file marked Project Hourglass, Eyes Only. In 1962, the military was experimenting with everything: psychological warfare, weather modification, and according to this file, temporal manipulation. The theory was that if you could slow down or stop time in strategic locations, you could gain tactical advantages. They were trying to weaponize time. More specifically, they were trying to create isolated pockets where military units could operate outside normal temporal flow. The idea was that a unit could be inserted into a temporal bubble, complete their mission, and then return to normal time. As Dr. Chun's team set up more sophisticated equipment, the full scope of the disaster became clear. The soldiers of the 441st Special Operations Group had been volunteers for an experimental mission that went catastrophically wrong. Look at this. Dr. Chen showed Maria a photograph from the classified file. 12 young soldiers stood at attention in front of what appeared to be a massive circular device. The timestamp read October 14, 1962. Final equipment check. The photograph was identical to the soldiers they'd met, down to the last detail. The temporal displacement device was activated on October 15, 1962, at 0600 hours, Dr. Chen continued. According to these files, the unit was supposed to experience accelerated time, completing a 30-day reconnaissance mission in 30 minutes of real time. What went wrong? Instead of acceleration, they got stasis. From their perspective, no time has passed. They've been living the same day, October 15, 1962, for 61 years. Maria watched as the soldiers continued their routine, completely unaware that the world had moved on without them. Can we help them? Dr. Chen's expression was grim. The device that created this temporal field was destroyed in a nuclear test 3 days after the experiment. These men are trapped in a time bubble with no way out. Over the next several days, Maria and Dr. Chen's team interviewed the soldiers of the 441st, documenting their experiences while trying to understand the nature of their temporal prison. Corporal James Wright from Kansas believed his girlfriend Betty was waiting for him back in Topeka. We're supposed to get married next month, he told Maria. Soon as this crisis with the Soviets gets resolved, I'm getting leave to go home. Maria didn't have the heart to tell him that Betty Wright had lived a full life, married another man, raised children, and passed away in 1998 at the age of 78. Sergeant Davidson showed her letters from his family, postmarked October 1962. My little sister Sarah just started high school. She wants to be a teacher. Sarah Davidson had indeed become a teacher, then a principal, and had recently retired after a 40-year career in education. She now had great-grandchildren. The psychological implications are staggering, Dr. Chen explained as they reviewed their findings. These men have maintained perfect mental health while living the same day for 6 decades. No aging, no psychological breakdown, no awareness that anything is wrong. Because from their perspective, nothing is wrong. It's still October 15, 1962, and they're doing their duty. Word of the discovery reached the highest levels of government within days. A meeting was convened at the Pentagon, attended by officials from the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, and the National Security Council. The question before us, said General Patricia Hayes, is whether we should attempt to extract these soldiers from their temporal displacement. Dr. Chen presented her research. From a scientific standpoint, these men represent the only successful temporal manipulation in human history. Studying them could advance our understanding of physics by centuries. And from a human standpoint, Maria countered, there are 12 American soldiers who volunteered for an experimental mission and got trapped in time through no fault of their own. Don't they deserve to come home? The debate raged for hours. Some argued that the soldiers were essentially already dead, existing only as temporal echoes of their former selves. Others maintained that they were very much alive and had every right to be returned to normal time flow. There's another consideration, Dr. Chen added reluctantly. If we successfully extract them, they would immediately age 61 years. The temporal displacement has preserved their bodies at their 1962 biological age. Returning them to normal time might kill them instantly. The decision came from an unexpected source. During one of Maria's visits to the camp, she was approached by Captain Morrison. Ranger Santos, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Maria nodded, prepared for anything. My men and I, we're not in Kansas anymore, are we? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean, Captain? Little things don't add up. Your equipment, your uniform, the way you talk. That device you showed me with the date. I've been thinking about it for what feels like months, but according to our log, it's still the same day. Maria realized that despite the temporal displacement, Morrison's mind was somehow processing the incongruities. Captain, what do you think is happening? I think we're stuck, Ranger. I think something went wrong with the experiment, and we're trapped in this moment. The question is, do we want to be unstuck? That evening, Morrison gathered his men for an unprecedented briefing. For the first time since October 15, 1962, he deviated from their established routine. Men, I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound impossible, but I need you to listen with open minds. When Morrison finished explaining their situation, the reaction from his men was remarkably calm. Soldiers, Maria realized, were trained to adapt to impossible situations. So, the Cuban thing got resolved without nuclear war? Asked Private Rodriguez. The Soviets backed down, Maria confirmed. President Kennedy and Premier Khrushchev found a peaceful solution, and it's really been 60 years. Corporal Wright asked. Dr. Chen nodded. Your families lived full lives. Some had children and grandchildren. They never forgot you, but they moved on. Sergeant Davidson was quiet for a long moment. What happens if we choose to leave this place? We don't know, Dr. Chen admitted. You might age rapidly, you might die, or you might successfully transition to current time. The science is completely unprecedented, and if we stay, you continue living, October 15th, 1962, forever, safe, young, together, but isolated from the world that moved on without you. The soldiers of the 441st conferred privately, their discussion lasting what felt like hours, but registered as only minutes on their temporal clocks. Finally, Captain Morrison addressed the group. We've made our decision, but we want to do this individually. Each man should have the choice. Over the next several days, each soldier made his individual choice. Some chose to remain in their temporal prison, content with their eternal brotherhood and the certainty of their duty. Others chose to risk everything for a chance to return to a world that had moved on without them. Corporal Wright chose to stay. Betty's gone, and I never really knew any other world than this. My brothers are here. Sergeant Davidson chose to leave. I want to meet my sister's great-grandchildren. I want to see what the world became. Of the 12 soldiers, 7 chose to remain in the temporal displacement, and 5 chose to attempt extraction. Dr. Chen's team used experimental technology to create a temporal bridge, a brief corridor between the displaced time and the present. One by one, the 5 soldiers who chose extraction walked through the bridge. Maria watched as Sergeant Davidson stepped from 1962 into 2023. For a moment, he flickered like a bad television signal. Then he solidified, still young, still vital, successfully translated across 61 years. The others followed with similar success. The temporal displacement, it seemed, had preserved them completely. How do you feel? Dr. Chen asked Davidson as he looked around at the modern equipment surrounding the camp. Like I just woke up from the longest dream of my life, he replied. But also like I'm finally home. The 7 soldiers who remained in the temporal displacement continued their eternal. October 15, 1962. Maria was designated as their official liaison, visiting them regularly to provide updates on the outside world and to ensure their well-being. The 5 who chose extraction faced the challenge of adjusting to a world that had advanced 61 years beyond anything they could have imagined. The government provided them with new identities, extensive orientation, and connections to their surviving family members. Davidson's first call was to his sister Sarah, now 79 years old. Sarah, it's Bobby. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I'm finally coming home from that mission. The conversation lasted 3 hours. Sarah had never stopped believing her brother was alive somewhere. She wants to meet tomorrow, Davidson told Maria afterward, tears in his eyes. She said she always knew I'd come back. Wright's girlfriend Betty had passed away, but she'd left letters for him with her daughter, along with a message. I waited as long as I could. I hope you understand. Please be happy. A year later, Maria continued her dual existence, living in 2024. While maintaining contact with the soldiers trapped in 1962, the temporal displacement remained stable, creating what amounted to a living museum of Cold War military history. The 7 who remained had adapted to their situation with remarkable resilience. They understood they were trapped, but they'd found purpose in preserving their moment in time for future generations to study and learn from. We're like lighthouse keepers, Captain Morrison explained to Maria during one of her visits. We're keeping the light burning on a particular moment in history, making sure it's never forgotten. The 5 who'd returned to normal time were adapting to modern life with varying degrees of success. Davidson had become a popular speaker at military history conferences, sharing his unique perspective on the Cold War. Rodriguez had enrolled in college at age 85, though he still looked 25, to study computer science. Sometimes I wonder if we made the right choice, Rodriguez admitted to Maria. It's amazing here in the future, but it's also overwhelming. My brothers who stayed. They have certainty. They have each other. Dr. Chen's continued research into the temporal displacement yielded an unexpected discovery. While analyzing the quantum signatures of the affected area, she detected similar patterns in other locations around the world. Maria, I think Operation Hourglass wasn't the only temporal experiment, she said, showing data from her global monitoring network. There are at least 6 other sites worldwide showing similar temporal anomalies. The implications were staggering. During the height of the Cold War, multiple governments had apparently been experimenting with time manipulation. How many other soldiers were trapped in temporal prisons, living the same day over and over? The Soviet Union had a program called Eternal Winter, Dr. Chen explained, reading from newly declassified documents. The British had something called Forever Guard. The Chinese had Timeless Dragon. We weren't the only ones trying to weaponize time. Maria realized that the soldiers of the 441st might not be alone in their temporal exile. Across the globe, other military units might be trapped in their own temporal bubbles, waiting for relief that would never come. We have to find them, Maria said. The question is, do they want to be found? The 441st adapted to their situation and found purpose in it. Other units might not have been so fortunate. The story of Operation Hourglass raises questions that go beyond military history or temporal physics. It asks us to consider the nature of duty, the meaning of sacrifice, and the price of progress. Today, the 7 soldiers who remained in their temporal displacement continue to serve their country in the most unusual way possible, as guardians of a moment in time when the world stood on the brink of nuclear destruction. Their eternal vigilance reminds us of how close we came to losing everything. The 5 who return to our time serve as bridges between past and future, carrying the memories and lessons of the Cold War into the modern age. They remind us that history isn't just something that happened, it's something that lives on in the hearts and minds of those who lived it. And somewhere in the Nevada desert, October 15, 1962, continues forever, preserved like a photograph in time, waiting for visitors who want to understand what it truly meant to stand watch at the edge of eternity. This is Heart of a Soldier, where where even time itself cannot diminish the dedication of those who serve. Until next time, remember that some duties transcend the boundaries of time and space.